The first weird thing happened before my grandfather's funeral even started. My Aunt Rebecca grabbed the guestbook out from under my hand like I was about to steal it. "Immediate family only," she said automatically. Then she looked up, realized who she was talking to, and added, "Oh, right. Sorry, Elliot." But she didn't sound sorry. Not even close. The hallway outside the chapel smelled like rainwater, perfume, and those flowers people only buy when somebody dies. White lilies everywhere. My grandfather hated lilies, said they smelled like hotel soap and disappointment. Nobody here seemed to know that. Or maybe they did and just didn't care anymore. People always become simpler after they die. Easier to package. Easier to perform. Walter Bennett spent 82 years being loud, sarcastic, paranoid, funny, difficult, obsessive, and smarter than everyone in every room he entered. But judging by the funeral pamphlet, apparently he'd transformed into a gentle old family man who cherished peace and togetherness. I almost laughed when I read it. Grandpa once called a waiter emotionally dishonest over undercooked salmon. Peace and togetherness, my ass. Rain tapped softly against the stained glass windows while people whispered fake, sad conversations around me. My cousin Tyler stood beside the coffee station, pretending to look emotional, while secretly checking basketball scores under the tablecloth. My Uncle Marcus kept shaking hands with strangers like he was running for office. Rebecca touched people's shoulders constantly while talking in that soft funeral voice people use when they want others to notice how compassionate they are. And right in the center of all of it sat my grandfather's closed casket beneath warm yellow lights. Quiet for the first time in his entire life. I stared at it too long. Something felt wrong immediately, though I couldn't explain why at first. Then I noticed the tie. Blue. Deep navy blue. My stomach tightened instantly. Grandpa hated blue ties. Genuinely hated them. He used to call them corporate funeral colors. Every Christmas he wore the same dark green tie with tiny silver stripes because he said it made him look expensive without inviting conversation. Tiny detail, stupid detail maybe, but suddenly I couldn't stop staring at it. "Who dressed him?" I asked quietly. Rebecca looked irritated I interrupted her performance. "The funeral home. That's not one of his ties." Tiny pause, barely there. Marcus suddenly became fascinated with his coffee cup. Tyler looked away too quickly. Rebecca crossed her arms. "Elliot, does it really matter?" Yes, that was the problem. It did matter. My grandfather cared about details more than anybody I've ever known. He alphabetized canned food, ironed receipts before filing them. Once drove 40 minutes back to a gas station because the cashier accidentally gave him $12 too much change. So somebody putting him in the wrong tie felt wrong in a bigger way somehow. Like the room itself was lying quietly. Rebecca sighed. "Can we not do this today?" There it was. The family phrase. Translation: stop noticing things that make everyone uncomfortable. I stayed quiet after that, mostly because I was tired. Not physically tired, soul tired. My mother died 3 years earlier. My dad disappeared before that. Grandpa was the only person in the family who still called me regularly just to ask weird questions like, "Do you think fish understand regret?" Or, How long do you wait before admitting a mechanic is scamming you? Half the time, the conversations made no sense. But after he moved into the nursing home, they became shorter, stranger. Sometimes he'd stop talking mid-sentence and ask if I heard clicking sounds on the line. Once he told me never to trust anybody who smiled before asking financial questions. Another time, he grabbed my wrist during a visit and whispered, "If Rebecca starts acting sentimental, somebody's hiding something." Then he laughed like he'd made a joke. I never figured out whether he actually had. The funeral service started 10 minutes later. Organ music hummed softly through hidden speakers while everybody stood and sat on cue, like actors who already memorized the script. The pastor talked about legacy, integrity, family values, standard funeral language. Meanwhile, I kept noticing tiny things nobody else seemed to care about. Marcus checking his watch every few minutes. Tyler whispering to Rebecca during prayers. Rebecca fake crying without tears. Even the funeral photos felt curated weirdly. Every picture showed Grandpa smiling politely beside family members. None showed him how he really looked most of the time, annoyed, suspicious, or arguing with somebody over absolutely nothing. It felt like they were burying a version of him that never actually existed. Halfway through the pastor's speech, Tyler leaned toward Marcus and whispered, "After the reading?" Marcus nodded slightly. Reading. My pulse ticked upward immediately. Grandpa's will. Of course. That explained the sudden emotional family reunion after years of barely visiting him. Rebecca saw him twice last year. Tyler forgot his birthday entirely. Marcus outsourced most nursing home decisions to assistants because he was too overwhelmed with work. But now suddenly everyone wore black and spoke softly about love. Funny how inheritance awakens grief in people. After the burial, everyone drove through rain to Bellamy's Steakhouse downtown. Grandpa hated steakhouses too. Said rich people only ate there because they enjoyed paying $80 for salt and atmosphere. But apparently his funeral somehow turned into a luxury networking event anyway. We sat in a private dining room overlooking the river, while waiters poured wine nobody touched. The mood shifted immediately after menus arrived. Less sadness, more anticipation. People started sitting straighter, watching the door every time it opened, waiting. And then Arthur Levinson walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. There it was, the real funeral. Arthur had been Grandpa's attorney for almost 20 years. Small man, gray hair, exhausted eyes. He looked like somebody who'd spent his entire career watching rich families become animals around money. The second he entered the room, conversations died instantly. Tyler put his phone away. Rebecca folded her hands dramatically. Marcus leaned back, pretending to look relaxed. Arthur cleared his throat softly. Walter requested immediate execution of selected inheritance directives following the burial. Nobody even pretended not to care anymore. Arthur opened the folder carefully. To my son, Marcus Bennett, I leave controlling interest in Bennett Hardware Holdings. Marcus exhaled through his nose slowly. Relief. Not grief. Relief. Arthur continued. To my daughter, Rebecca Holloway, I leave the lake property and associated trust accounts. Rebecca pressed tissues to her eyes immediately. Incredible timing. Tyler received a classic Porsche restoration fund because Grandpa once promised him one after teaching him how to fish. My cousins got stock portfolios, investment accounts, jewelry, property shares. Every few minutes, somebody murmured emotional gratitude while mentally calculating numbers behind their eyes. Honestly, that part hurt more than I expected. Watching everybody reduce Grandpa into transactions before dessert even arrived. Then Arthur paused, looked directly at me. The room shifted slightly. Tyler smirked already like he expected something funny. My grandson, Elliot Carter. Silence settled over the table. Rebecca suddenly stopped breathing theatrically. Arthur reached into the briefcase and removed a tiny brass key attached to a faded plastic motel tag. Room 214, Sunset Motor Lodge. He placed it gently in front of me. Nobody spoke. Arthur slid a second item across the table. A sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's crooked handwriting. That was it. No trust fund, no money, no explanation. Just a motel key. Tyler snorted before he could stop himself. Rebecca shot him a warning look that basically translated to, "Not yet." Marcus frowned slightly, but not in confusion. More like concern. Real concern. Interesting. "That's all?" I asked quietly. Arthur adjusted his glasses awkwardly. Walter was extremely specific. Rebecca finally touched my arm in that fake soft voice she used around witnesses. "Oh, sweetheart, your grandfather adored you." I looked at her hand until she slowly pulled it away. "Did he?" Tiny silence. Tyler reached for his wine glass, hiding a smile badly. I picked up the motel key. It looked old, scratched, cheap. The kind of key people stopped using 15 years ago. Arthur cleared his throat again. "There is one additional instruction." Everybody looked up immediately. Walter insisted Elliot visit the motel within 48 hours. Marcus spoke for the first time. "Why?" Arthur shook his head. He refused to elaborate. My pulse quickened slightly, because something changed around the table when Arthur said that. Rebecca's posture tightened. Tyler stopped smiling. Marcus stared too long at the key in my hand. Nobody looked confused anymore. They looked nervous. I opened the envelope slowly under the table. "Elliot, if you're reading this, then I was right not to trust them. Go to room 214 alone. Don't tell your family what you find there, especially Rebecca. If the photograph is gone, leave immediately. And Elliot, I'm sorry about your mother." The last sentence hit me hardest. My throat tightened instantly. Grandpa almost never apologized for anything. Ever. When I was 14 and broke my wrist falling off his roof trying to clean gutters, he looked at the x-ray and said, "Well, that'll teach you gravity exists." That was basically emotional vulnerability for him. Seeing "I'm sorry" in his handwriting felt wrong in a terrifying way. Suddenly, Rebecca's hand shot across the table. "What did he say?" I folded the note instantly. "Nothing." "Elliot," her voice sharpened. "Let me see." "No." The room went still. Even Tyler stopped pretending not to listen. Marcus leaned forward carefully. "What's in the note?" Private instructions. Rebecca smiled too quickly. If it concerns family property, you visited him twice in 18 months. The words came out before I could stop them. Silence. Beautiful silence. Rebecca blinked slowly. Excuse me? You heard me. Marcus stepped in immediately. Nobody's attacking you. Really? Because Tyler's been trying not to laugh since Arthur gave me this key. Tyler raised both hands. I made one joke. You made 4. You counted? Grandpa taught me to. That landed harder than I expected. Marcus looked away immediately. Rebecca's expression cracked for half a second before smoothing itself again. Elliot, she said carefully, your grandfather wasn't entirely himself near the end. There it was, the line, the one families use when dead people become inconvenient. My stomach twisted hard. Funny, I said quietly. He sounded pretty clear about not trusting you. Nobody moved. Tyler stopped smiling completely now. Marcus looked genuinely alarmed. Rebecca whispered sharply, "What exactly did that note say?" And there it was, real fear, tiny but unmistakable. I stood up slowly. You know what's weird? My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Nobody cared about Grandpa's tie being wrong. But suddenly, everybody cares about a motel key. Marcus stood too fast. Elliot, no. My chest felt hot now. You all ignored him for years. Now suddenly everybody's emotional because there's money involved. That's not fair, Rebecca snapped. Fair? I laughed once, short, ugly. You tried putting him in assisted living 3 years before he wanted to go because he was becoming difficult. Tyler muttered quietly, Jesus. Rebecca's face darkened instantly. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know he called me crying after that meeting. Silence exploded across the table. Tyler stared at his plate. Marcus rubbed his jaw hard. Rebecca looked like she wanted to slap me. Arthur slowly closed his folder, pretending not to exist. I grabbed the motel key off the table. Whatever's in room 214, I looked directly at Rebecca. You already know about it. Nobody answered, which was answer enough. I left before anybody could stop me. Rain hammered the parking lot outside. Cold wind hit my face hard enough to wake me up a little. My hands shook while unlocking my car. Not from grief anymore. Adrenaline. Something was wrong here. Deeply wrong. Grandpa knew it before he died. And whatever he hid in that motel room scared Rebecca enough to break character for the first time all day. I climbed into the driver's seat, breathing hard. The motel key sat heavy in my palm. Room 214, Sunset Motor Lodge. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the screen for a second before opening the message. Don't go to the motel tonight. Cold spread slowly through my chest. Another message appeared immediately. Your grandfather wasn't the only person keeping secrets in room 214.